Good morning. I'd like to inform you that the publicity of this proceeding will also be provided through shorthand typing and through the report on the web TV of the Chamber of Deputies. It requires that remote participation is allowed by the current regulations. On our agenda, we have, as part of our fact-finding mission on geopolitical impact connected with rare earths, a hearing of Henrik Schiellerup, the NGL. On behalf of the members of the committee, I'd like to thank Mr. Schiellerup and for the willingness to be part of our proceedings. I'd like to remind you that the Geological Survey of Norway is an agency of the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Fisheries of Norway and aims at promoting sustainable economic growth. With regard to rare earths, NGU is also involved in mapping mines so as to guarantee solid and resilient supply chains. In this context, in March 2024, Norway and the European Union have signed a bilateral strategic industrial partnership bilateral agreement with the goal of reducing vulnerability in their supply chains. With this brief introduction, I give the floor to Mr. Schiellerup so that he can make his presentation. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. It's an honor. So, I will start by presenting some of the Norwegian perspectives on mineral production and developments within rare earth elements. So, yes. I'm presenting from our offices in Trondheim, 500 kilometers north of Oslo. It's dark and it's winter. So I'm pretty much present here today as a representative from the Norwegian Ministry of Trade, Industry and Fisheries. This ministry is the one hosting the Geological Survey and the Mining Authority, and also the ministry that follows up the activities within exploration and mining in Norway. So I'm going to bring you some Norwegian context and talk shortly about Norwegian policy development, what our mineral industry looks like, and what the current developments are in Norway. And I will talk to you about rare earth elements and the projects we have on these commodities. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Fisheries has been responsible for a lot of the policy development of relevance for mineral extraction and refining in Norway. During the last 3 years or something like that, we have seen a range of policy documents emerging dealing with future production of raw materials. So we have a new Minerals Act which has been on the way for some time, but the ambition is to land this new act during spring in 2025. It's going to make it, the ambition is to make exploration and mining more easier and more predictable in Norway, maintaining rules and regulations on the way. So we have a battery strategy that was released in 2022, and batteries is, of course, one of those advanced products that we are concerned about when discussing critical raw materials. So batteries kind of remains an important driver for mineral strategies and policies all over Europe. So we have an industrial initiative. It has been updated once, and there's a new white paper on industry policy coming online during spring of 2025. And the new mineral strategy was published last year. That's the most central document in the mineral portfolio here, policy portfolio. So the strategy aims at making Norway a stable supplier of sustainably produced raw materials, and it has a focus on circularity, faster realization, access to capital, and also anchoring in Western and European supply lines. So we have a range of partnerships in various forms with the EU, with the US, with individual European countries, with raw materials at the base. I just want to briefly introduce you to the current situation in Norway. Norway has a thriving minerals industry and some 30 mines extracting metals and minerals. The industry in total employs around 4,500 people. So we usually discern between metal mining, such as iron and copper, and mining for industrial minerals, such as quartz, graphite, limestone that you see on the list here. But what you see on the map here is well, is the various production of metals and minerals. We actually only have two metal mines in production at the moment. That's an iron mine. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we have an iron mine up here in central Norway. And then we have titanium mining in southwestern Norway down here in the bottom here, where we produce some 5% of the titanium minerals in the world. And then we have a new titanium mine ramping up at the moment. Ingebø, it's on the list here. I will show you in a minute as well. So I've included also the trail and natural graphite deposit in the list here. It's the most important producer of high quality natural graphite in Europe. It has just been bought by the UK Swiss company Norge Mineraler, who will take over production from February next year. And natural graphite is one of the sort of critical raw materials that are used, that are highly critical and used in lithium ion batteries as a node material. And the supply line for batteries is fully controlled by China, who has recently tightened the export restrictions on graphite materials. And the situation there is actually quite similar to the rare earths that we're going to talk about in a minute. So beside this production, we have quartz and quartzite, partly used to produce silicon, which is a very important production in Norway. It's a very important supplier to Europe. We're Europe's biggest supplier of olivine, which is a mineral used in steel production, and nepheline cyanide, which is used in ceramics. When it comes to export, aggregates as a cross-drug are actually the most valuable commodity, so which is maybe a special. But even if our minerals production overall is considerable, the output from the processing industry is maybe even more, or is a lot more important, both for Norway and for Europe. So we are one of the top European producers of a range of processed raw materials. So Norway produces 40% of Europe's aluminium. The company Glencore in Norway has Europe's largest refinery for high-grade nickel, producing also cobalt, copper, and platinum minerals. We have Europe's highest capacity for silicon metal. The Swedish company Boliden is doubling their capacity in the zinc smelter. We also produce manganese alloys. We have a recent development within rare earth element separation, but I will come back to that at the end here. So as I mentioned, a new titanium mine has just opened on the west coast of Norway and is ramping up production. Nordic Mining, who owns this mine, is partly owned by the Japanese Iwatani Corporation, and we expect that much of the minerals extracted will be refined to titanium metal, which is also a critical raw material. So a range of projects in the pipeline. Some of them are mentioned here. Let's say these exploration highlights, that they are shown with purple markings on the map. Ingebø is still on top here, but as I showed before, we've just moved it into production. But the other projects are very close to the Russian border, and the very northern part of Norway. We have an important iron mine which closed in 2015 and is moving towards a reopening. We have a manure copper discovery at Nussir, also up there in the north part of Norway. There's a lot of activity in our old mining camps for copper, zinc, and nickel, and in southern Norway, I should mention two projects that are advancing. This Norge Mineraler project in southwest is targeting phosphate, titanium, and vanadium, which is a major project, and we have the Fehn rare earth element deposit south of Oslo. If you can see my cursor, it's down here, which I will talk about a bit more about now. So, but just a little bit of context first. I'm pretty sure that this is known, but rare earth elements, they are still the best example of what happens to supply lines when important commodities are challenged by strategic monopolization and of raw materials that are needed for certain technologies. In this case, it's permanent magnets primarily, but also other things. China has a pseudo monopoly, and they have used this monopoly actively within rare earth elements to build control over industrial value chains that depends on these commodities and are important also to our society. So, but rare earth elements consist of the 15 metals you see at the base of the slide here. which we call lanthanoids, and then we usually include yttrium. They tend to behave very similar in nature. They appear in the same minerals and the same geology, but they have very unique properties that make them irreplaceable in many modern technologies. And the rare earth elements, they are all marked in green in the table here, which come from the EU Commission. And as you can see on the from the green labels, you can see that China is standing there in front of all of them, and the sort of the share of global production is either 100% or 85%. So, and last year, of course, I'm sure you know that China announced a ban of rare earth element extraction and separation technologies, or the export of these technologies, and further tightens the grip in the business here. This map actually shows the same. It's also from the EU Commission, showing the same thing. We usually divide the rare earths into light and a heavy group. And you can see that for light rare earths, China controls 85% of the world production, but for heavy rare earths, they control almost everything. And you can also see in this context that rare earths is just one of a range of mineral commodities which are partly or fully controlled by China. The EU Commission also placed the rare earth elements at the top of the sort of criticality ladder. Here is shown in red color, very high supply risk for these commodities, and we mostly focus on their applications in permanent magnets, like you can see here in the renewables, but you need them actually if you want to convert electrical energy into physical motion. You need permanent magnets, and then you need rare earth elements. This is what you do when you drive a car, but also if you want to convert movement into electricity, which is the essential function of a wind turbine, you also need the permanent magnets in there. So they are really important in lots of the renewable energy technologies, but they have many uses within medicine, defense technologies, lead lightning, and so on and so on. There's also from one of the European reports showcasing the vulnerability of the European supply lines for wind turbines. So currently China produces 63% of the rare earths from mines in China, but they do also control the mines in Myanmar. This is less than what they controlled in 2010, but back then they controlled almost all the production of rare earths. But downstream, China is now controlling pretty much everything. So we go from 63% Chinese dominance in mining via 87 and 91% in the processing and refining steps, and then we come to 94% when it comes to the production of the permanent magnets. So and then of course the technologies that use the permanent magnets here, the wind turbines. The European share of the manufacturing capacity for wind turbines is considerable also today, but the figure is some years old, and I think it's not as large as in this figure here anymore, the 58%. But the figure shows just how exposed the European wind turbine industry actually is to supply risks in this segment. So rare earth elements in Norway, deposits in Norway, we have a number of known deposits and deposit types, but it's only the Finn deposit here on top in South Norway that is currently in good progress and economically interesting. It's by far the biggest that we know of. And if you look at the map here on the left, you can see how it's lying here just southwest of Oslo. The Finn deposit is in many ways a classical rare earth element deposit, as this is the most common type which is developed into production worldwide. The deposit type is called a carbonatite, and it's actually an old volcanic conduit, an old volcanic channel. And 600 million years ago, we think we had a 1 kilometer high volcano on top of the deposit as it is looking today. So, but Finn is the largest known resource of rare earth elements in Europe, with 10 million tons of contained rare earths. And these rare earths are mainly the magnet metals, neodymium and praseodymium that we are talking about for the permanent magnets. We have 2 companies active in the area, which is a little bit messy, but that's how it is. The company Rare Earths Norway, they control 90% of the deposit, whereas REE Minerals has the remaining 10%. Even if the FIN projects are progressing well, they have to be considered somewhat early stage in terms of bringing them into production. The figures for resources are what we call inferred resources. It means that there's a degree of uncertainty on the estimates. There are preliminary economic assessments on the deposits, and we usually describe them as being in pre-feasibility stage. But the Geological Survey of Norway drilled the deposit in 2018 to confirm the potential that are lying there. And we have documented the mineralization down to at least a kilometer. So, so a considerable tonnage and a good grade actually. If we compare FIN with other deposits around the world, the known deposit, we can see that it's actually also big in global context. So what you see here is the size of the deposits along the horizontal axis and the ore grade on the vertical axis. And this means that the stippled lines you see in the diagram, they represent the total endowment with rare earth elements in the deposits around the world. So you have to be aware that the scale is logarithmic, so each line marks a 10-fold increase. So this means, for instance, that the famous sort of Chinese deposit, the big Chinese deposit at Bayan Obo, which you see sort of on the topmost topmost right, is actually accounting for almost 30 or more than 30% of the currently known world resources. So we have active production in Australia and the US, and the ones that have been highlighted in yellow here are the Nordic deposits. So that's, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Greenland resources. And you can see also that the Greenland deposits are actually very large. But FIN is a big European deposit, the biggest we know. And at the same time, this is kind of a race. There are close to 150 maturing rare earth element projects around the world. And we know that we do not need all these. We need a fraction of these deposits. So also building a European value chain from extraction to manufacture is actually a bit. The time is essential actually. So this is a slide I've stolen from Rare Earths Norway, the main the company working the FIN deposit. So they are drilling now. I think they're planning to drill 10,000 meters more this year. The Norwegian government has channeled 5 million euros through our innovation funding into the construction of a power plant, a pilot plant, to test the beneficiation, the processing of the mined rare earth element ore, which is coming out here, and it should be completed and in operation in 2026. So it is a well progressing project, but things take time. My last slide deals with the processing of rare earth element concentrates, which where you have to once you have extracted the rare earths, they need to be you need to make a concentrate of the rare earth element containing minerals. You need to process them, and then you actually need to separate all the rare earths into individual components because they each have their own applications. So, one of the advantages of the FIN deposit is that only 40 kilometers away from the deposit at the south of Oslo here, we have there is now a factory for rare earth element separation. It's run by a company called Retec. It's one of very few facilities in Europe that can do this. I can also say, in 2022, the Swedish state-owned mining company, LKAB, they became the largest shareholder in this company. And this is actually a consequence of the discovery in northern Sweden that the companion deposit to the Kiruna iron ore, it's called Pergaia, is actually rich in phosphate minerals that contain a lot of rare earth elements. So they have a strategic interest in also joining the retake family, so to speak. Yeah. So there are offtake agreements in place. Retake used to have an agreement with a Canadian supplier or mine that was coming online, but this is not going to happen now. So I'm actually not sure. It's not known to me exactly where they get their rare earth concentrates from, but I can guess that China probably must be in there somewhere. So just in conclusion, yes, we have a very big deposit in Norway. It's progressing well. It's maturing, but it's some years ahead. I think the companies are mainly concerned about how to ensure that production will survive a price war or a trade war on rare earth elements. They are anchored in downstream industry and offtake agreements with European off-takers and manufacturing industry. Yes, so this is actually, this was my last slide. This is just showing how the Geological Survey are mapping for some of the commodities in Norway, flying geophysics over the island of Senja in northern Norway. So thank you very much for listening.
Grazie mille, Dr. Schiellerup. Davvero
Thank you very much. This was very interesting. I do actually have some questions for you. So if you have a few more minutes to be with us, I would like to ask you a few more questions. I'm going to ask you my questions following the order in which you presented them. So at the beginning, you spoke about a new law that should come into force in the spring of 2025. I was wondering if you know the content of this law. Can you tell us what this law is going to be addressing? Then my following question is whether you could maybe briefly summarize the trade strategy carried out by Norway, especially when it comes to the transformation, production, and export of rare earth elements and of all those elements that are needed for the green and digital transition. Most importantly, I'm wondering which kind of integration exists with Europe. I imagine that there is a lot of cooperation at the European level. So maybe to be more precise, my actual question is if you believe there is a possibility to increase and improve this cooperation that is being carried out, or if, on the other hand, you think that Norway is already working at a very high level and therefore it is doing more than what it could do with the European Union. And then moving on to my last two questions, I was wondering, first of all, how much you feel that China is an actual competitor. What I mean is that we know that China is one of your main competitors. This is what you presented to us in your presentation. And I'm wondering if this is something that actually concerns some of these supply chains in which Norway places itself, or if you believe that actually these chains are separated, globally speaking, so you're not really concerned with this competition, or at least you're not too concerned. And lastly, I am wondering, when it comes to public debate, how you manage the environmental impact of all these activities, which of course we have not had a chance to address in detail, but we know that this is also a big impact. We know that the environmental impact is pretty strong. I know that in Norway, just like in other countries, very often there are some demonstrations. People go down to the streets and try to protest again certain choices. So I'm wondering how you involve the public opinion, or if you do involve them at all, in order to face this aspect as well, and that is environmental impact. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks a lot for the questions. The new Minerals Act, which is should come online before Easter, is an updated version of I mean, we have an existing mining law, but we but the new Minerals Act is actually going to sort of the world has changed since the Minerals Act first came in 2010, and we are trying to make both the sort of the framework for exploration, mainly in particular, and the mining actions more easy, more smooth, more predictable. We are also concerned about the reporting of the production and the maintaining of data that are coming out of the minerals industry. So these are national strategic data that should be collected. There is what should I say? We have had the Minerals Act out on public hearing 2 years ago, so there's been a lot of interaction with both the mining industry and the public about certain choices in the act concerning, for instance, timelines. How much time can you maintain an exploration permit? What do you have to do when you have an exploration permit? What must you report? How do you have to document your activities and so on? And when you move from exploration to extraction permits, what are the conditions? And what are the rules? How are they handled? So it's supposed to make the system easier, I guess, and at the same time more predictable and manageable from the public side. So that's the main, and then it regulates, of course, production and what is happening on the close down of mines and so on and so on. In terms of the trade strategy, yes, I heard that during the introduction of me or of Norway. It was mentioned that we have partnerships with the EU. Norway is not a member. It's not an EU member state, but we are part of the EFTA, the European Economic Area. So we are part of the market, the internal market. But there is a lot of activity to strengthen this. The agreement with the EU is actually supposed to go beyond the EEA agreement concerning raw materials to batteries value chains. So there's been the Ministry for Trade and Industry has been working intensely with the EU Commission on establishing this partnership and a roadmap for how this is going to be developed. There are also it also means that Norwegian exploration and mining projects are applying for status as critical raw materials, a strategic raw materials project under the Critical Raw Materials Act, which has been adopted by the EU member states in May this year. Because Norway is not an EU member state, CRMA is not by default adopted here, but the work is ongoing at the ministry and at the government level to evaluate having the Critical Raw Materials Act functioning also for Norway. So, and Norway is also a member of this. It's originally American initiative, the Minerals Security Partnership. Italy is also part of this group of people nations trying to establish and build. Let's say Western value chain, or it's actually non-Chinese value chains from production to manufacture of critical raw materials. So there are a number of bilateral agreements between Norway and Germany, France, partly UK. There's a bilateral agreement with the US also, with all of these with raw materials at the base actually. I don't know if anything is going on with Italy as well. So all these partnerships are aimed at increasing collaboration with the EU, on the bilateral sort of conditions, also with member states and states outside of Europe. We are working a lot in Europe. I mean, I represent a government institution. It's parallel to the Italian ISPRA, so we work a lot on European level. We are under an umbrella organization with all the other geological surveys in Europe. We have an office, we have a joint office in Brussels, and are very close to the EU Commission on raw materials, trying to find out what do we have, what can be developed. We are harmonizing data so the EU Commissions are able to make informed sort of decisions and have the right strategic material to do so. So we work a lot at many levels. Actually, the government is working at the level, the bureaucracy is working, and also some of our institutions, such as the one I represent as well. Then there was a question about China being an actual competitor. I don't think that we have to question that, but it's maybe a little bit sort of opinion based. But everything that is developing now is increased trade wars. It's partly bound also in defense strategies and trade strategies and so on and so on. And the raw materials are key also in the sort of discussions concerning chip technologies and so on. So yes, they are definitely an actual competitor, but they are not the only country that has been trying to monopolize value chains on a national scale or an international scale. Use these monopolies to gain a monopoly also on a full value chain. But it's the most staggering example. So they have a benefit of scale. They have a benefit of being able to use state subsidies in their developments. And then there was a question on environmental impacts and how we handle it. And it's, of course, this is a big challenge for mining, because mining represents an intervention into nature. You really do have to make a hole in the ground to get the commodities out. But you have to make these impact not only do you have to make these impacts as small as possible, you need to convince the general public that you are actually doing everything you can to make these impacts as small as possible. The biggest controversies concerning mining in Norway it's two things. It's either concerned with the Sami people in northern, or the reindeer herding in northern Norway, and then it's concerned with what do we do with the mining waste. And mining waste is a very big issue, because today we simply do not know how to use all the mining waste that we have generated from mining, not only in Norway and Europe, but around the globe. So also all solutions are actually challenged, and we have to do more to make sure that we can use as much as possible of the mining waste, and be very, very careful about how and where we deposit the mining waste. Maybe also be concerned about how can we use the disposal sites for things afterwards. In most cases, this is not toxic material, but it's just something that nobody wants. When nature starts working on the mining wastes, it usually there's a risk for leakage out of both metals and sulfates and so on. So actually, it's a key part of the new Norwegian mineral strategy that we have to engage with the general public in areas where we have mining or want to have mining. It's part of the sustainability demands. Actually, the social acceptance is just as important as the resource that you have in the ground. So if you can't make people accept that you need a mine, then it doesn't really matter how rich it is. Yes, I don't know if that covered all the questions, but some of the questions are sort of a little bit more insight into the ministry, but I have answered them as well as I can.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much. It was extremely useful. Your answers were extremely... Since you mentioned defense, perhaps my last question before I thank you and take my leave of you, I'd like to put a question to you about the defense sector. I don't know whether this is part of your activity, but are there any limits on the export or the mining of resources with regard to certain materials which are considered strategic for defense and national security? Are there any constraints? Can a foreign is a foreign company prohibited from mining and exporting immediately? Does the material have to be processed in Norway before exporting? And you mentioned China and state subsidies. And do you have state subsidies in Norway, or is it totally a free market approach? And so how do you manage materials which are considered to be strategic? Are they managed in a special way compared to other products? This is my very last question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the questions. No, we don't handle them, the strategic materials, in any other way. Norway is a very open economy. No, there are no restrictions. But a lot of the Norwegian ministries were interested in the mineral strategy that came out last year. Also defense, foreign, the foreign department, trade, of course, and all. But also defense are looking into raw materials as not also for Norway to be a supplier into into the alliances we have, but of course also in direct production of defense material. So Norway has a defense industrial sector, Kongsberg, who also produces defense technologies. So no, there are no restrictions, and I guess that Norway has never actually been challenged to do that either. We have one of our major companies producing quartz in Norway and refining these to silicon. It's called Elkem. It has a 50% or 51% Chinese ownership, as far as I know. It's a concern in some of the discussions with partner countries, but it's not. It has never been challenged on a Norwegian scale. But of course, also Norway as part of NATO and in the discussions with the EU, these dual-use raw materials are well, everybody are actually concerned about these about this dimension of the raw materials production. I forgot the last question. Sorry about that. So we have the strategic.
State subsidies was the last question, I think.
Norway follows the EU. The rules are the same in Norway as in the EU and the trade organization, international trade organizations, and so on. So it's the Frascati rules that are the base of how you can subsidize. However, we do have innovation funding. There's also a scheme coming up now called the Green Industry Scheme, but it's not directed specifically towards raw materials. We have support things or measures within export financing. There are loan-based schemes and grants to research and development. But basically, developing a mine has to come mainly from private capital. Then also in the mineral strategy, further government schemes have been considered, but they are not fully developed or considered in the Norwegian government, but yeah, I don't know how far we are in these negotiations or discussions, but at least the funding schemes have been discussed. We do not have, but some countries have now established funds to support new projects or de-risk, loan guarantees and so on. But there is nothing of this in Norway so far, beside the ones that I have mentioned here.
Thank you again, Mr. Schiellerup. I don't see any other questions, and so I think we can thank you very much, and therefore take our leave of you, and we consider this hearing at an end now.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.